Okay. Okay, so welcome to today's session. Today we are going to look into deployment strategies. And by the way, you are looking at a beta version of PCF Custom Control Builder. This is not released, but there are nice updates that I have done in the tool. As you can see now, you don't need Visual Studio command prompt location anymore. You just need to give the control location, and even the solution would be built using MS Build, but it identifies the MS Build by itself. I'm still doing some beta testing, so this might be released in a couple of weeks. Anyway, so coming back to the deployment strategies. So now we have already talked about CDS solution, but we haven't really looked into the CDS solution. But that's not the only way that you can deploy. You can also deploy your controls via a quick deploy method, or what we call in Microsoft language is using authentication profiles. Okay, authentication profiles, think of them as you are creating profiles on your local system. So it's machine dependent. You have to go through the authentication process of Microsoft, and where you can enter your username, your password, and then and you also have to provide the instance URL, and then it just saves it. So how XRM Toolbox does, right? XRM Toolbox has this connect feature. So you can connect to various connections, and then it saves these connections, right? So it's using the same methodology, but it's saving them on your PC in one of JSON file, uh, the information, and what it and it's part of the framework. So it's part of the pack commands. It's one of the pack commands. So in the tool, if you want to set up a new authentication profile, you can always go here and then say create. And the only thing that you need is the CDS environment URL. Once you provide the CDS environment URL, so let me just go ahead and then delete it so I can recreate it again. And then you can actually see the profiles as well. So as you can see, there are 1, 2, 3 profiles on my system right now. There should be a pop-up, and I believe it's not working because I'm using the beta. This is one of the drawbacks of using a beta test. Let me just clear this out for a second. I'll just fix this in a minute. Okay, go back here. So there was supposed to be a pop-up that should have shown, but because the changes that I'm doing, it broke that functionality. So I have to use the actual original version. And okay, so this is our older version again. So let's go and do the authentication profile. So list authentication profile. It runs through it, and this is the pop-up that I was talking about. So now I have like 3 authentication profiles created. I'm going to select this one. And what I can do is I can actually manage the authentication profiles from the tool itself. So you can either delete it, or you can even switch it. So like right now, my current default profile is this one. I have to change it to, let's say, this profile. So I can say, OK, make this one as current. So it's going to change the profile. So once it changes it, you can go back to list profiles, and then you'll see that the new profile is now the second one. OK, I can delete the old profile. So I'm going to delete that. Okay, so now it's deleted. So now I only have 2 active profiles. I can go and create a new profile. So if I go and create a new profile, the only thing that I need is my URL. That's the URL that I need. I'll say OK. Once you initiate that, it would give you a pop-up for you to enter your username and password. OK, so I'm going to enter my username and password, which I keep forgetting. So that's my username. Enter my password. Once you enter that, it would tell you that it was successfully able to create the profile. And if I go to my authentication, and the latest profile that you create would always be the current one. So now if I go to list profiles, the profile that I just created would be the latest one. So as you can see, the third one is the latest one. So every time whenever you create a new profile, it would automatically be turned on as the current profile. Okay. And then obviously when the tool loads, tool shows you the current authentication profile that is that's available on the system. If there's no authentication profile, it won't show anything over here. Okay. Now once you have the component built, and once you have the authentication profiles created, you don't have to go through the mechanism of creating the CDS solution. So let's say you're working with a control, and you're not able to fully test the control in test harness. So test harness itself is having some drawbacks, right? It doesn't have CSS. It's not truly true test, right? So as a developer, you also want to do your testing by deploying your components in CRM. Now, once you're deploying it, every time you might not want to go through this process of creating the CDS solution and then deploying the CDS solution into your instance for testing, right? It's too much work for a developer. So for that, what Microsoft has provided is they have given us an ability to quickly deploy the solution to CDS environment without creating the CDS solution. Okay, that is done through deploy without solution, which I have renamed it to quick deploy in the new version. So this method is only for testing. This method should not be implemented for your actual deployment. So if you have deployed your component using this method, you should not deploy the same. So what happens? Let's see what happens. So let's deploy this, and then it asks for publisher prefix. Because I've only created the authentication profile, but it doesn't know what my prefix should be. So I'm going to say PM training. Okay. So now it's running. What it's doing in the backend is it's trying to deploy the control. So it says, OK, this control was not found in the current organization. So let's do a full update. So it's creating a temporary solution, as you can see here. OK, and then once the temporary solution is created, it puts it under the obj folder, wherever the location is of your control, and then it's building a temporary solution wrapper now. This normally doesn't take that long. It should be quick. There you go. And then now it started the solution import process, and it goes through 7 steps. And now it's trying to publish the customizations. Okay, so now it's completed its processing. Let's go to the to our instance, and there you can see the solution exists. Solution name would always be Power Apps tool, and then it would have underscore and the name of your prefix. So whatever prefix you gave would appear over here. Okay. Now, if you go inside this, you would have the solution created, but the solution would have the prefix that you gave, which could be a temporary prefix, right? It doesn't necessarily have to be an actual prefix, because if you look at the solution itself, the publisher is again Power Apps Tools publisher underscore PM train. So it's creating its own publisher all the time. Okay. And then inside this it would have the control. Now what you could do is you could go on the on any of the entity and then add that control on your form. So let's go and do that. And as I said before, we don't have the ability to put custom controls using the new form. So we have to go to the classic view. And it's taking its sweet time. Okay, there you go. Okay, and let's put this on account. Do I have a field? Let's put this on description field for now. Okay, so now I already had this demo control, but now this is from the training that we created the other day. And character limit is optional, so we are not going to enter that. Save it. Publish it. Okay, refresh the form. And go to the detail section, and as you can see, the for some reason it's not showing me. Oh, there you go. I think so it's on the on change event. Yeah, so on the on change event I can see my control working fine, right? And I can also see the unsaved changes and everything is working good. Okay, now if there are any updates that you have done to your control, you can build it, and then you can actually skip the testing part if you want to, or you can test it in the harness. Once you have tested it, you can again use the deploy without solution file methodology, right? So if I say let's go ahead and then do some changes.
Danish, can I ask you one quick question?
Mm-hmm.
So let's suppose if you make that field mandatory description and you don't provide anything, how the error would appear, or it would not appear at all?
Oh, it would appear. It would just say that like how. Let's try to do that now. Let's see. Okay, so I've done that change. Let's build it. Okay.
Also, just why it's not recommended to use this deploy without solution. For example, in case I have like one solution that I'm placing all the controls in it, and I don't want each time to like have a solution for each control. I have like one solution that have all the controls. So I will deploy it without solution and then adding it to that to that solution. Is that will be an issue? Is that like will miss something? Is this only meant to be used in testing, or no? The full control will be deployed, but without your solution.
Yeah, so that's what is recommended on their link. That's what I have read. Uh, And let's see. I mean, when I was looking into this, that's what they said about where is deploy.
But it goes as unmanaged solution, right?
It goes as unmanaged solution. Yes.
So basically, theoretically, we should be able to move that control to any other solution if we.
Yes, you could. Right.
Yeah, because if I'm in the sandbox instance, and then I will move it to my to the main solution or the solution of the controls, and then I will ship it to the production. So I will not have I will not have like too many solutions for each control will have its own one.
One solution, right? I totally get your point. Let me just I can't find it right now. I'll try to find that link. But basically, that is not what what Microsoft recommends. So I'm just following Microsoft guidelines.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, I mean, you're right. But also think of this. The prefix would also matter, right? So you want your own prefix all the time. So this actually creates a prefix, whatever prefix. So whenever you're trying to deploy, if you're giving a prefix and if it's not right, then it would just create the wrong control. So
if it's not as the same as a publisher, it's not a good practice then. Like
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Right. And also one more thing, the for custom control deployment, the publisher should match. So the prefix should match the publisher prefix of the solution. So if this is PM train, and if I go ahead and then add this control to some other solution, and that solution prefix is something else, then it won't work. The export works, but the import fails.
So it's basically for testing only.
Right. Oh, yes, but also not. Yeah, this particular is for testing, but you can certainly use the prefix that matches the prefix that you're gonna use to do the deployments. Like how Abud was saying about, he has one solution, which is the recommended way of doing it, and all the custom controls would be in one single solution. We just have to make sure that all those custom controls prefixes are equivalent to the solutions publisher prefix.
Actually, Danish, I can suggest an idea then to the plugin you wrote. Like if you have a list of the solutions so that we can choose where that control goes.
Yes, that is already on my plate. I haven't had time to work on it. It's that was the first thing that I thought about, like having multiple PCF projects going into one single CDS project.
Yeah.
So it makes your life easier. So you can have one CDS project, and then actually you can do that. You can add multiple controls in the same CDS project. You can do that. I just haven't implemented that yet.
Actually, I don't know if your answer exactly matches my question, but on your plugin in the XML toolbox, instead of filling a new solution name, if you allow us to select an existing solution, for example, Abud can take that control to his solution that contains all the controls, right?
I see. That's a very good idea. I like that.
Good.
Yep.
Thanks.
All right. If you get a chance, post it on the GitHub so I don't forget it. But yeah, that's a good idea. If you don't get a chance, then I can put it on GitHub so that I do remember working on it. Okay, so coming back to this, and the thing that I wanted to showcase in this was you can do your build. You can keep on changing your code, build it. If you want to test, you can test it in the local harness. But once you're ready, you can always deploy. Now, once you're deploying it, it doesn't know the publisher prefix. So you have to remember the publisher prefix that I used before, right? So now I'm using the same publisher prefix. Now what it does is it would recognize that the control already exists in that environment. So initially it told us that the component does not exist, but here it will say the control exists in the current environment, loading the controls detail. and now it's comparing the manifest files. Now, because in the tool itself, I'm always updating the version numbers, so it automatically updates because it updated the version number. It identifies that it's a full update. But if you don't update the version number, it still recognizes that as an update and then pushes that control in CDS. Earlier, what used to happen is if you don't update the version number, the updates were never published to CDS. So the old version was still applied, and the control was not getting updated. So with this, they have resolved that issue. Okay, so now if you go here and let's go and refresh this, our manifest file should have that second attribute, second parameter as required, which should show up here as required. And there you go, it's showing as required. Now, if I try to select OK, it will tell me, oh, you haven't configured this. I won't let you allow doing this. So to answer Jay's question, this is what error you see while configuring the control. Okay, so I'm going to bind it to some static value, and I'm going to say OK. So that
I think Danish, sorry, I think my question actually, maybe maybe asked in a wrong. Maybe I didn't ask the right question. Maybe the understanding is a bit different. What I was thinking is actually let's suppose if you make the description field mandatory.
I just checked.
Oh,
And
description field mandatory on the form.
Exactly, because you mentioned about the error would actually appear in a different way, and you would lose the error control.
Oh, I see. Okay, you was referring to the earlier discussion that we were having. Okay.
I just tested. I'm using in one of my solution. I'm using the rich text editor control that in the PCF gallery, and the field is mandatory. So it's showing me the default error message. I don't know if that's the error message was provided by the development of the control, but it showed me the exact value is missing message.
Yeah, because I think we didn't do any validation in the character count.
Yeah, we didn't. So let's see.
Yeah.
It should be showing as required. It doesn't show the star message because we have hidden the label. Okay, there's nothing here.
Also, if I remember, we got rid of the control altogether, right? We replaced it with a text area control.
Yes. So this is a text area control. Yeah. It does show the required field must be filled message.
Yeah, because that's I was thinking I'm just still when you mentioned that this error we will lose the control over this error, we have to build our own errors, and it kind of made me a bit worried.
No, I stand corrected. I was wrong, and you would
that's completely fine. So I think there are two ways you can do error handling, right? So, well, seems like it. I haven't tested error and error message, but I'll do that. But technically, if you have any errors that you would like to implement or any kind of validations you can implement, you want to implement, you can do it on the form, on the CRM form itself if you want to.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. But you have to make sure that you're doing the get outputs and then returning the data back to CRM so that CRM gets that values and then does the JavaScript validation.
Yes, exactly. So because if you make the description field empty, then the behind the scenes the description field in the CRM CDS should also become empty so that the error actually gets triggered, right?
Yes.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay.
All right, and I do have other question if you don't mind.
If it's pertaining to what we are trying to do here, yeah, go ahead, please.
For the solution that you said, quick deploy, and you provide the prefix. So does that, because Microsoft says this solution, it's not the right way to do it, but The question is, what happens to this solution? So it still remains in there, or it deletes automatically after some time?
No, it's always there. It's up to you
Okay.
how you want to manage it. So for example, how Abud was saying, I could put a prefix of, say, whatever prefix I've been using throughout my deployment process. Let's say it's PM. PM is my prefix that I normally use. So I can keep PM instead of PM train,
Mhm.
and this prefix would have PM underscore and then my entire control.
Mhm.
And then I can have another solution where all my controls are hosted, and it can have the same prefix, and I can just include that over here, and I can then delete this solution,
Mhm.
because this is an
So
unmanaged solution, so you can delete it whenever
exactly.
you want.
Yes. Perfect. Makes sense. So in that case, like, the Power Apps tools, the prefix of this solution that which we deployed from your tool, XM Toolbox, is it something that, Microsoft recommended prefix, or is it something that you have provided, the Power Apps tools?
No, this is Power Apps tools. They put it as part of the framework.
Mhm.
The part after that,
It's the
PM
prefix that you
train, was
provided
the
at the time.
prefix that I
Yep.
provided,
Makes
and
sense.
and that's the prefix that goes on the control as well.
Makes sense. Okay. Good to know.
And also one more thing that I wanted to point out here is when you're trying to delete the component, once you have moved your component, let's say to another solution, and then or you're trying to delete the component itself, especially from this particular new framework, don't delete the component from here, because there's a bug that I've already communicated to the product team. And that bug is, if you try to delete it, it doesn't check for dependencies and it just deletes it. But the reference is still there on the form. So your form crashes and does not ever load. So you would lose your form altogether. And the only way to fix it is through editing the XML of the form to make it go away. So if you want to delete your control, go to the old interface and then try to delete it, just so that it does the dependency check. Okay. Okay, so that's all we have in the authentication profiles. So authentication profile you can create, you can list, you can delete, and then you can deploy. Okay, any questions around authentication profiles or quick deploy? Cool. So next thing is, how do we now we already have this solution created. So let's go and remove this before we try to reuse this control, because it would check for the definition, I believe. Control, remove it, and save it. Okay. Now I would delete it from here itself, because I know I've only used at one single location, so it doesn't actually. I know for sure, right, that it's been removed. So there's no dependency. And I'm going to delete the solution as well. And let's go to the toolbox again, and let's create the solution. Now, here is where you can create the solution wherever you want. Like you can choose your own path for your CDS solution. Okay, but to simplify the process, what I am doing in terms of organizing the structure is inside this. So here is your index file. Inside this index file, you would see another folder getting created for hosting the solution. Okay, I might change it in future, but because I didn't wanted user to enter control location separately and solution location separately, I just wanted to simplify this process for the users. What I'm doing is I'm actually creating a solution inside this folder. So if I go here and then say my control name, so the recommended is not to give the same control name as your solution name, just because you need to differentiate the folders and also differentiate the control with the solution. So I do solution and then the publisher name. npm train. Okay, so that's what I'm gonna do, and then I'm gonna say create. So this is first gonna create a CDS project. Okay. Oh, sorry, no spaces allowed in the publisher name. Okay, so now it created the project. So let's go and see. So now here you can see that there's already a this tool created a folder called training care counter solution, which is the name of the solution. And then if you go inside it, you would see that the same name of the folder, it created a CDS project file over here. Okay, inside this CDS project file, there's nothing right now. It won't have the component. To add your component, you have to click on this add component to solution. I don't know why I did that two-step. I could have done it in one. But here you click on add component to solution. Now what would happen is it would go and add your component to your solution. And I forgot where. Oh, you don't see it now, or maybe I forgot where you can see it. But here you can see it in the console that the project reference successfully added to your CDS solution project. Now you build it. Okay, and this build requires MS build, and it doesn't uses the npm build. So components run on npm build, but the solution project runs on MS build. Okay, so that's running and build was succeeded. And now if you go to your debug folder, you'll see that there's a solution zip file created for you. And in the solution package or console, you can see that it told us it created the package and then it processed all these things and it didn't add anything except it added our control over here. So the custom control was identified and added to the project file or the solution file. And you can also see that same thing over here as well. Okay, so here you can see the name of the control. And if you go into the zip file, you can see there's a control file and the control name would be the prefix underscore your namespace and then your control name. Okay, if you go inside it, we had what, two files in this solution, right? We had index file and then we had yeah, we just had index file, but doesn't matter. You could have multiple files created, and we wrote the code in TypeScript. But what the framework does is it bundles it up into one single file called as bundle.js, and that is what you see here. Okay, so if you're using React, if you're using any other libraries, say you're using Jest or any other libraries, right? Whatever libraries you use, it compiles all those libraries and creates this bundle.js. Okay, now sometimes you can have like hundreds of libraries that you might be using, and this bundle.js might get above 5 MB. That's when you would get an error while deploying the control in CDS. So make sure that you're not using too many libraries. Too many libraries means you're going to slow down the process as well. So make sure that you're not doing that. Okay. So that's how the structure is. And now once we have a zip file, we can go back to the solution, go back to the tool, and now you have the option. Actually, before you deploy, when you're building it, anytime you build it, it would always build itself in unmanaged solution. Okay, so whatever solution it will create as unmanaged. Now let's say you want to create a managed solution, then you have to click on this managed button, which would change the configuration of MS build, and it would package it as in a release mode as a managed solution. Okay, so it's up to you. We're going to keep it as unmanaged for now. let me do this. Let me just show you. So let's go through the build. And yeah, so there you go. So here it says what it is doing. So initially it was creating a directory for debug mode because it was running into debug mode. That's why there you go. I lost that. That's why it when it created the folder called debug, and then it created an unmanaged solution inside the debug folder. Now it's running under release mode, so it determines that it needs to create an managed solution. So that's what it does now. Okay. It does places the solution in the same location, so it gets overwritten. So if I go back to the folder and go back to bin, oh, it does give me release. So now it has the release folder and it has the debug folder. It has two folders. So this is my unmanaged and this is my managed. Okay. And whatever you're selecting, if you selected managed, then you can deploy the managed solutions, which is what we are going to do now. And for deploy, we need to connect to an instance. I'm going to connect to my instance that we're using. And it started importing, and then it would publish the package. So you don't actually need any of the XRM functionality per se for connection until you come to this step. This is the step where you are actually using the XRM toolbox capabilities or connection thing. So as I said before, you don't, when you are working on a control, you don't need to actually connect to an environment. You only need to connect to an environment when you have reached the stage of deploying it. Okay, so let's go back here and refresh this. And now we should be able to see our character counter solution, which is the training solution. And if we go to the settings, it is the managed solution. So it tells us that this is a managed type. Okay. Any questions? No questions? Ah, cool. Okay. I think so. That's all I had. We went through the authentication profiles. We went through the deployment strategies. There's managed and unmanaged solutions that you can create while creating the CDS solution, and also the way the folder structure is working, how the solutions are getting created, and how what you should be doing when you're working with the solutions in CRM. So you can have an unmanaged solution here, and then you can move it out and then put it under different solutions if you want to deploy it from one instance to another instance. But the only thing that you need to make sure is that the prefix of the controls matches the prefix of the solutions publisher.
I have one question.
Mm-hmm.
Have you ever tried, sorry if I missed it, I was working on something as well. Have you ever tried, like, for example, integrating this in a pipeline like Azure DevOps?
We have, yes. It's all through the solution. So the DevOps pipeline, if you're using the Power Apps build tools, then through Power App build tools, if you're deploying the solution, the way normally you do for any other CRM solutions, it would work
Yeah,
absolutely fine.
like for solution, I understand, but let's say I changed some CSS classes. I changed something in the TypeScript in the control, and I want it automatically deployed. does I don't recall it, but does the Power App DevOps tools provide a build for the control?
Good question. Yes. Well, not Power Apps build tool, but you can certainly build it
Command line.
using DevOps.
Okay.
Yeah, through PowerShell, because it's all using npm commands to build your control, and then the second that you would need is ms build to build your solution. So you'd need two things: npm commands to you need PowerShell to run npm commands, and then you would need ms build to build your solution. You can certainly do it. Now, Natraj, he's one of the MVP. He has extensively worked on PCF control as well. He does amazing job for the community. So he recently, I saw a post from him where he has implemented this in the DevOps, and I believe I already have the link planned for the next weekly newsletter. So if you look at the newsletter for next week, then you should be able to see the link for his. He hasn't written a blog, but explained the process. Probably I'll put that in the newsletter.
Thank you.
So, Danish, the question actually leading to the same question. So when you put into the DevOps, right, the challenge that I see right now is because the build, the solution, the control itself builds into in its own solution, right?
Currently, yes.
Yeah. So and
If
then
you use
if
the
you
tool, yeah.
yeah tool, and if you actually yeah. So let's suppose if you actually try to build something like in the Azure DevOps, and then you have a solution for this control, and you would like to build that. So once you build that solution, you need to get that control, or put it into the existing solution, or you can directly put it to the existing solution itself.
Right. So one thing that I think Omar suggested was to in the control itself have a solution drop down where you can select a solution where you can just deploy the control in that particular solution. That's one option. The other one, from DevOps perspective, you don't need. What I'm thinking, you might not need to create CDS solution itself. You just create the control, and then you have a CI/CD pipeline created. So when you are ready with your control, when you have tested it using the local test harness,
You can target the
then you
solution.
check in. Yeah, you just check in the solution in your source control, which would kick in the CI/CD pipeline, and then try to deploy it to CDS.
Okay, makes sense.
Okay. Any other questions?
I do have something other than today.
All right. Let's hold off on that, Jay. Let me
Definitely,
see
no problem.
if anyone else has any
No,
other
sure,
questions.
sure, no problem.
Anyone has any other questions relating to deployment?
Thank you.
No, you're welcome. Jay, you want to go with your question then?
Yeah, sure. So the question I have is about if I would like to use form context in PCF.
Right now, there's no way you can use form context in PCF.
Okay, because I actually got into one situation. I wanted to make sure that I wanted to check the form like state form mode. Actually, pretty much, I wanted to check if the form mode is update or create, and based on that, I would like to read only or make it visible field and stuff like that. So, are you saying that we should use XRM for that right now?
No, XRM is not supported. XRM is going to go away.
Well, it's deprecated so far. Well, as far as, to be honest, wherever I've seen is actually everybody's using XRM for that. Yes.
Let me see. I thought there was a way. I don't remember where exactly have I seen it, or someone did ask this question earlier, but I don't recall what the answer was. Let me try to find that answer for you.
Sure.
Form factor. This is the no. Let me find that answer for you.
The issue is here. If you have like contact with the product team, if you check the context variable while it's like in the runtime, if you are debugging it while it's in runtime, it has like major like maybe like all the property that we need.
Yes.
But it's not available here.
Yes. Right, you are absolutely right on that. It does have some properties that are not available in here, and we have been using that again because it's not documented anywhere. It's unsupported. That's why I don't want to give it out on the recording. But I can certainly ping you guys and then give some of those unsupported, or I would say unsupported at this point because it's not documented, but it might be supported down the line.
Okay.
So I can certainly
So
give those pointers to you.
so does it mean that that context actually pretty much gives you everything but within the form what you have?
It doesn't give everything, but it gives pretty much everything. I would say
Okay.
80%.
Check it like in the runtime.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
really,
maybe
you
I'll
will
just
not,
do debug.
you will find too many properties. For example, the record ID, record the entity name, the app ID, all the information that you will need: primary attribute name, primary attribute
But do
value.
you get those wrapper messages like get attribute or for like the form mode and for the types and other things? Because that is something like a lot of logic is depends on that. So yeah, not too sure. Okay,
Yeah. So that is something that I can look into if it's available or not, and then I can let you know.
cool, cool.
Yeah.
And when
But
you said
basically, what you do is as was it Umar, right? Umar was the one who was pointing it out, right?
Which one? Sorry.
Oh no, sorry. Abud was
Yeah.
just yeah. Sorry, I got mistake. So you just go in your DevTools and search for index.ts or
and just
ts, and then just look for. See, now I have multiple controls on my form, right? So all those controls would be loading, and all those controls would have index.ts. But I don't want. I want that specific for that one single control. So I would have this training character counter. That's what I want. And then as Abud said, that you can actually put a
text
debugger somewhere in your code and then see what the context gives you.
exactly. Yeah.
What we are using here, let me put here and try to refresh this. Refresh and should show up here. Go to details, and there you
There
go.
you go. Cool.
And now you go to context and you can see that, oh, this is the hover one. I don't want this one. This is a different one. And this is again different one. I have too many controls on my form. And there you go. Now we are on the one that we want, and just to evaluate in selected context, and then you'd see that you get so many of them, right?
You
You
had
then get,
page,
yeah, you should have, yeah, you get page also, yeah.
get client. Okay.
And yeah, you'll get a lot of this stuff which are not right now not part of the not part of the like the control when you are developing.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, you'll have to just look through this and then identify if you can find anything in this. Let me look into it and I can let you know. It says is read. I don't know what that means. We'll have to just change the mode and then see what's happening, what's coming through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But basically, that's how even I try to find things from the
Yeah,
context.
from the context. Yeah. Okay, makes sense. Yeah, that's perfect. Because I don't know. One of the things I actually noticed as well is even when you work with the web resources, so PCF obviously cannot solve all the problems for you, right? So you actually start using some modal dialog boxes which are in the UCI right now, which is really great feature. And now you need to use form context in certain way. And how would you do that? So people create global files and global variable and they start using it, or people are still using XRM, to be honest. I'm not too sure XRM going to go away. I've been hearing it for some time, but as far as in the web resources, I don't know what is the other way to use it, right? The form context, how to pass it, because you can pass form context to forms and you can pass it just a checkbox, but that checkbox is not available in web resources at the moment.
Right.
So yeah, That's kind of a confusion there.
Yes, and you're right. I mean, there is we need that, and we already have an idea out there for the product team to implement, and then make sure that we get what we want from the form context passed to the PCF control. So I
Yeah.
think so. Scott Duro also pointed it out to the product team in the forum. So that has always been the conversation point in the product team. So hopefully they implement that soon.
Because even if you go to the documentation, to be honest, on the web resources, you would see like if you want to pass form context in the documentation itself, it says use xrm.page right now.
Right.
For the web resources, it says that.
Yeah.
But
For the
like,
That's
PCF, it isn't.
yeah.
so
That's
the
why
web
they're not able to
resource,
remove it, right?
Yeah.
Because it's still dependent on certain things, and there's no, they haven't provided any alternative, so they cannot
Yeah.
actually remove it unless until they provide any alternative around it.
Exactly.
so correct me if I'm wrong. Like you say, currently, if we don't use the page, we still can use the form context in web resource. Like if you pass it in that
Yeah.
checkbox, you will get form.get context, right? Or context actually get form context.
You will get the event context, and then you can get from it the form context.
You mean in the
If you're
web resources? In the web resources, there is
Yeah, in the web resource.
so if you're so what they're referring to is, I don't have a web resource. Let me enter web resource. Hope I have some. Come on. But there, I have encountered an issue with that as well. With that, with with this. Let me see. Do I have any web resource?
I kind of understand the reasoning why Microsoft don't provide like a supported way for the context, because I agree it is very useful, but their thing, I think, because it's a single control, you are inside the control, you don't care what's happening outside you, which is the context of the form. Unlike the web resource, you are on a form level, not on a control level. You control everything, kind of thing.
Yep, exactly that. And also from the security perspective, you're loading some other HTML. Well, then how does that work in terms of security, right? You don't want, how secure is your HTML?
I think I have a different thought on that, because you are already authorized and authenticated into CRM already, right? So it's that means it's actually a trusted resource anyway.
In
The
CRM, yes,
right, so it makes sense.
but
But
if your HTML is calling a third party page, right?
Mhm,
How secure is that, right? If
mhm,
if if through that third party app, say
mhm,
you added an iframe, or you are loading that in a DOM in your HTML, you're loading that dynamically on a DOM, say on a div tag, right? And then that third party's website gets hacked, or
mhm.
the intruder is able to get access into their website. Don't you think through that if he has access, if CRM gives access, full authority access to the web resources, they would be able to penetrate into CRM?
Well, it makes, see, I do agree with you that that's fine. But the only difference, I think there is so I think that the context is a bit different. So first of all, like that's the vulnerability anyway, regardless of PCF or anything, right? That's kind of a true for PCF as well as for the web resources, if the context gets available, right? Now that feature is available for the reason that people could actually use that, right? Because since they've used XRM initially was a global variable, you could use anywhere, right? Now, if you're in the form and you pass the contacts, that's one thing, right? You can use it because it's actually the part of form. But if it's outside, so I have used web resources way beyond just in the form itself. I've used web resources just as itself, and it loads with the integrated with the IVR. You don't need to, bind it to the form. So it depends. I think the context actually gets changed, but that's the vulnerability regardless of PCF or the web resources. To be honest, you can still call Azure APIs anything from your PCF as well. So the risk is also there too, right? So I don't know which one is right. The security is pretty much tight on both the sides anyway.
Yeah. But this is the thing that other guys were talking about, is you pass the record object code and
That's when you actually bind the web resource onto the form, right?
right, Right.
Exactly.
Yes.
But if you have web resource, if you want to open it itself, you only had client.aspex.js
Yes.
file that you get
Yeah.
actually, right?
Right.
So I do have, in the recent model-driven apps, right, there is a new xrm.navigation.open web resource method, right? It opens
Right.
up a dialog box, right?
Yep.
And that's pretty good, cool feature. But the thing is, if you want to pass the form context to it, you can't, because
Right.
you can only pass data as a parameter. You can pass the web resource name or any entity name or entity form name or ID whatsoever. You can pass it to it, but
Yep.
you can't pass this form execution parameter to it, right? You
Right.
can't do that
Right.
because that opens up the web resource itself.
Yep.
And if you want to use form context in that, how would you do that? There's no such way as such right now.
Yeah.
So
I totally agree. Yep.
yeah, that's the one I was referring to. On forms, I think it makes sense. Yeah, you can have that parameter passed, but if you open the web resource itself, then you don't.
Right. Well, we talked a lot about different things as well. So it was a good conversation. But if there are any other questions, then let me know. If not, then we can wrap up for today.
Danish, I do have a question. If we are using any service, any third-party service where we need to authenticate, so we will need to provide password and username. What is the best way to store that password and username actually securely?
So if you're storing anything secure, you shouldn't be using anything in CRM, right?
Keyword.
Because CRM doesn't have anything. The only way you can store it using secure is Azure Key Vault or any Key Vault services that you would prefer. I normally prefer Azure Key Vault because it's easy and it's Microsoft. Everything is in Microsoft space domain. So I like to use anything related to Azure a lot.
So you will
And
be
it's easy to use.
okay. You will be accessing Azure Key Vault from your PCF control to get the
Right.
password and
Right. Yes.
okay.
Yeah.
But it's still the secret and the client you would still provide in the PCF itself, right? Or you would provide when you're binding the control, right?
I mean, if your secret is not going to change, then you can provide it in the PCF itself. If you're building it for a client, and if it's not going to change, but if it's going to change, then the secret and the client could be in a environment variable, so that it changes
Exactly.
per instance, and then you can access the secret and the client in the PCF control through from the environment variables.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Perfect. Cool. Danish, will you be taking any sessions after this, on any other topics? Do you have any such plans after
So
PCF?
so let me stop recording for that.
Yeah, sure, sure.
I mean,
Okay.
it's not